Fairy type is, as of making this video, the most recent type added to the Pokemon franchise. But being the genius that you are, you probably already knew that. In fact, this whole video may be useless to you, but some may not understand the intricacies as to why this type was added. Back when Steel and Dark were added, there were a number of good reasons. In Gen 1, there were barely any Pokemon that would have fit those types. And also, it was Gen 1. Why bother with more unnecessary types before you know your franchise is going to be long-lasting? Just adds more complications than what is necessary. Also, in Gen 1, Psychic type was broken as heck, way too powerful. So by adding new types, they would have an opportunity to add another type that's strong against Psychic type. Thus, Dark was added. But back then it was fine. The series was still fresh and young. Making drastic changes is just an everyday thing for early sequels of games. But a whole 14 years later, they would add the Fairy type in. Generation 6. Pokemon X and Y. And the reason wasn't much different. Over the 5 generations, the Dragon type was getting more and more powerful, eventually to the point they needed a nerf. But instead of dealing with actually nerfing them, why not just change the whole meta and add in a new type that is strong against them? In fact, more than just strong against them, but also immune to them. Yeah, that'll show those dang dragons! This would wind up being the Fairy type, and this is also the confirmed reason as to why they added it. Various quotes and interviews from the developers prove it. But to make this video longer than a minute, let's also answer, why Fairy? Why was the Fairy type added over something else? Let's get into it. Check out this edgy Noggin skull surrounded by fairy stuff. Ain't it great? It's on a t-shirt at noggin.net and only available this month, so get it now or get it never. So, why fairy and not something else? Well, first, you should figure out what that something else would be. It has to be something that previously existing Pokemon could be, otherwise there wouldn't be enough of the new type. So, what could that be? You could do sound, cosmic, magic, light, rubber? All have arguments for them, but I feel like those deserve a special, separate video. But, as mentioned, the main reason they were even considering the addition of a new type was to have something to be super effective against Dragon, and none of those really sound like they would be. I guess magic could be, but then again, does fairy not imply magic? Fairies, and really fey creatures as a whole, are magical creatures themselves. It's similar logic to sound type never being a thing, because normal works just fine. Sound is a normal, everyday thing that just about everything experienced is. You know? Dragon, in and of itself, also sort of has subtypes after all. Not every dragon-type Pokemon is a dragon, or even anything close to one. And plenty of Pokemon that aren't dragons, in the slightest, are still able to learn some dragon-type attacks. If you watched our video that explains what the dragon type is, then you'll know this already, but in summary, you could say that the dragon type is another way of saying arcane type. It encompasses not just the abilities of dragons being dragons, but also that of dark magic, sorcery, bending mana or infinity energy to your will, which dragons in most mythology are capable of doing after all. Think of it this way, in the beta of the Gen 1 games, flying type didn't exist, instead we had bird type. Yeah. But later they learned that more things can fly besides birds, like bugs, balloons, and of course, dragons. So instead of keeping it bird type, it became flying type, as that is the trait all of these things had in common. They fly. But in the case of Dragon, well, back in Gen 1, it was just Dragon. Dragonite and its line were the only Dragon-type Pokemon. It was a dragon. Dragon-type. Only later did the definition start to change and evolve, and more Pokemon could learn Dragon attacks, and more non-dragons were granted the type. All Pokemon are magical creatures. Some just have fire magic, or water magic, or plant growth magic, you know? And dragon magic came to sort of mean arcane. It's raw magic. Mana in its purest form. Just straight up infinity energy being blasted at you. So, how are you going to come up with a type that's immune to that? And that's super effective when attacking it? It's science type! I don't believe in your magic, so I'm immune to it. In most modern fantasy, especially JRPGs, magic has classes, or types itself. Typically, the simplest of these breaks it up like so: fire, water, earth, air, light, dark. And if the arcane, raw sorcery that is the dragon type fits dark, then the new type should also be magic-based and fit light. After all, if we take light and dark magic sort of literally, while the dark powers are super powerful, both offensive and defensively, like dragon-type Pokemon, all you need to do is illuminate that darkness, and it's worthless. Light type. But now here's a problem. The dark type is only called that in the West. In Japan, it makes more sense. It's the evil type. If we were to add a light type, people are going to get confused as to why it's literal light when the dark type isn't literal darkness. Why is light more associated as the enemy to dragon instead of an enemy to dark? What's going on? It's confusing. Plus, there are many moves from a load of different types that produce light. Light works more as a secondary trait rather than a standalone type. Again, like sound. So while light type would work, it has plenty of reasons and plenty of good arguments against it. Same goes for magic type. Is that to say the other Pokemon aren't magical? Well, how about this? Nature type. Dragon is all about taking over the natural mana in the world and reconstructing it in their own image. Arcane dark dragons are the antithesis of nature. So that would sort of imply that nature is actually weak to dragon, which is kind of the opposite of what we want. Although I guess the opposite also makes sense, but I mean, no matter how much something hurts nature, Mother Nature always hurts back more. Nature is eternal. Nature is the light magic dragons take control of and twist. So they can't do much against an entity that can just take that back. But that gets kind of confusing. I mean, I'm still confused by the last paragraph. And how would that interact with all the other types? And in a lot of places around the globe, we sort of associate grass type or plant type with nature. So it doesn't quite work there either. But do you see where I'm going with this? Fairies, fey creatures, if you were to really simplify modern tellings of fairy folklore, you could say that they are light magic using nature spirits. That's all three of the other possibility of types combined. And again, if you saw that video explaining how the dragon type works and the one of how the fairy type works, then you probably understand the connection here. Fairies flow with nature's natural mana stream, the infinity energy that everything has. Dragons take it and bend it to their will. But if you take that dragon attack and attack something that is in tune with the natural mana flows, like a fairy, couldn't that fairy just ignore the dragon attack? Fairies are magic. The dragon attack would pass right through them, or just continue flowing around them, because the fairy is perfectly in tune with it. The fairy already flows mana, infinity energy, around, so doing that while being attacked with it in its purest form from a dragon? That's no issue at all. Meanwhile, again, dragons base their attack on taking the natural mana around them, turning it into its raw form, and blasting it out. Think of it like changing the path of a small stream. But fairies, well, they have full control of that stream and can flow it along and turn it into a river. Think of how much harder it is to control a river compared to controlling a small stream. That's why the fairy type terrain move weakens dragons even further. The mana is so much harder to control because of all this fairy aura everywhere. Imagine trying to cut down a tree. You're taking control of natural energies. But now apply the same fairy magic to the tree and it grows significantly faster than you can even cut. And that's why the fairy type was chosen. It doesn't mean Tinkerbell, not literal fairies, in the same way that the dragon type isn't just literal dragons. It's magic commonly associated with dragons. Similarly, the fairy type is magic commonly associated with fairies and elves and such. In other words, natural magic. the light magic of nature. The perfect counter to dragon. And that's why the fairy type was added specifically. Be sure to check out our other videos that I mentioned for more details, and thanks so much for watching. Never stop using your noggin, check out the merch store, Gnoggin.net, and check out the rest of our Dragon and Fairy Month videos, because it's great.